Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway.
Welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about the Romanticism period in France. So there's a lot that goes with this era, this time, around literature, around art, around people, important figures, and Claudine is going to give us the download today.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite periods, and it might be a lot of people's favorite periods, but maybe they didn't even realize what it actually was. They might just think that, oh, I love this painter and I love this author. And then you're going to find out now that it was all a certain period in France.
Yeah, that's probably very true. I think a lot of us don't know like the different eras or when it is.
Yeah, and it was a period that it was in Europe, but of course we just talk about French things. So Romanticism itself, the era that it was born after the Revolution, and it was a way for a lot of the artists to kind of rebel against the neoclassicism and the ancient ways that were very structured and very academic. And all of these artists, just over time, you start back at the Middle Ages, and obviously things, look at now, contemporary art is a very far cry from, Romanticism. But it covers over a period of time. Depending on where you look, it is usually about 1798, so after the Revolution, and it goes until 1837. Some places say until 1850. Some places even gave it a whole 100-year period, which is not. It's more, very end of the 18th century to about 1830, 1840-ish. So it was, at that time, Charles Baudelaire had said in 1846 that Romanticism couldn't be defined by its subject, but by the way the artists feel. And it was all about intimacy, spirituality, and color. And that's the biggest thing that you will definitely notice of some of these. My favorite, very favorite painter is Romanticism, which is also probably why I love this so much. But some of Jacques-Louis David's pupils were very much, all ended up moving into the Romantic period. And Jacques-Louis David is the one that painted the fantastic, huge painting of the coronation of Napoleon.
Wow.
So very much, history painting, and, he was a painter to Napoleon, and just these, very neoclassical, just these beautiful, beautiful paintings. But he also did start to kind of push into the romantic feeling of some paintings, like with the Oath of Hirati and the Death of Marat. He was, pretty rooted there in neoclassicism. But then he, then later on, we'll tell you how he didn't like that so much. But it's neoclassicism. When you look at the paintings of that, and when you go into the Louvre and you go into the Denon wing, and so you walk right out of the room of where the Mona Lisa is. There's two huge long rooms, and they're both in painted red. It's called Pompeii red, and they've always been that color. The Louvre has never changed it, and it's called Pompeii red because it's the same red that they found on the walls of Pompeii. Oh. So it's this really beautiful kind of brickish red color. But these are these two huge rooms. One of them is basically like David and his students, and that's where you're going to find the Sacré de Napoleon and a bunch of his other paintings and those of his students. And they all are very luminescent, like their skin is like looking at porcelain. And the biggest thing that you notice with neoclassicism is you don't see any brush strokes. So it's all very, very, very smooth. that will all completely change when you go to Romanticism.
Oh,
They were very heavy in the Greek and Roman influence and a lot of history themes and biblical as well. But he had quite a few students. And so in that same room, we'll find some of the paintings by Antoine Jean Gros and also Jean-Auguste Ingres. And so Gros was like David, and he painted quite a few things of Napoleon. Napoleon used his paintings as like propaganda. I mean, it was like, the 18th, 19th century Instagram. Like, this is how I want, just took a lot longer to create it.
really?
But this was his way of saying, putting out this message and changing the narrative of the story. So in 1804, Gros painted this painting, and it was Napoleon visiting the plague victims of Jaffa. And it was based on the actual event in March of 1799. And Napoleon himself commissioned this painting because he had gone down there, and they went down into Jaffa, and they ended up actually like going into this place where all the sick and dying were, and they basically like poisoned them, and like 50 people died.
What?
Yeah, so it doesn't, that doesn't look so great on your, in the press.
No.
And so he commissioned Gros to do this painting. And so this painting is it's this huge painting, and it's just to the right from the Sacre de Napoleon. And it shows Napoleon in the middle of it, and he's like reaching out and like touching the wound of this sick person, which, and then you see in the background one of his, aides like putting his hand up like, no, don't do that. And in the bottom corner of the painting, there's all these people that are like, sick and dying. But it was his way of being like, see, I'm godlike. I
care.
I care, and I could touch this wound, and I'm not going to die. And Gros basically based it on a piece that you've seen a lot of times in art, and it's Christ healing the sick. Like, Christ touches him, which is what, Louis the 14th and many other kings, and of course Napoleon, thought that just by touching somebody, that they were basically, God came through them, that they could heal somebody.
No.
So this was, at a time that was, leading is very neoclassical, but it was starting to, inch towards Romanticism. His other student, Ingres, he was born in 1780, and at 11 years old, he was already enrolled in the Academy of Toulouse. And at 16 years old, he was in Paris studying under David.
At 11 years old, and he was already, what?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, people say, living in the time now, I mean, there's a lot of things not so great about it, but people all say, like, oh, I would never want to live back then. It's, so much better now. But it's like, 11-year-olds entering into the painting academy, or 13 years old, you're 13 years old, and one day you could rule a country back then. My nieces and nephews, there's no way.
You should not be ruling anything, not even the playground.
Yeah, and my nieces and nephews are fantastic, wonderful, and I love them to death. But I can't imagine a child now at 11 years old being like, I'm going off to the academy.
They grew up really fast back then.
They did. I mean, that was like middle age practically. But he ended up working under David. He was one of his most accomplished and best students. But, and he was, David was teaching him all about neoclassicism, which was, far from what Romanticism was. But then Ingres decided, like, he was like, I kind of like some of this a little, some of these things I kind of like a little bit better. But he was also inspired by ancient Greek and then the Italian Renaissance. And so his pieces, would have a little bit more color. In 1827, he did the Apotheosis of Homer, which is, you could see it in the Louvre, but you could also see it on the ceiling of the Louvre in the museum that was Charles X, which we'll talk all about that a different day. But it was inspired by Raphael's Vatican fresco that brings kind of all of the greats from the time. And so Ingres did that as well. And at the time, he kind of was doing it as a way of saying, like, these values still need to be in art, still need to be upheld. And so, he was kind of moving into that a little bit because of the colors that he liked and some of the themes. But he was also at like, no, these are the way they were. I mean, it's like any other time. Like, these are the people who want to stay with tradition. And these other people are like, hey, but yeah, I like using red and I like making everything curvy. hippie.
Like, what are you doing, you hippies?
Yeah, so but he did the Grand Odalisque, and which you can see also in the Louvre. And it is an odalisque is a woman that was in a harem, and in 1841 he painted that. And at the time, of course, this was one of those paintings, and this was before Manet did Olympia. This was one of those paintings where it's like that woman is nude and she's not an allegory and she's not a biblical, and oh my gosh, everybody's freaking out because there's her naked, derriere. And so everybody kind of freaked out. It has all these exotic touches on it because at the same time that all of that Orientalism and stuff was starting to really become kind of big in France, because it was it was very exotic. They hadn't seen all these things before. It was commissioned by Caroline Murat, who was the sister of Napoleon, but she never paid for it because Napoleon fell. But then it ended up eventually coming into the collection of the Louvre. But these are ones that were kind of like just these little steps right into Romanticism. One of the biggest ones that definitely, was the huge breaking point was Theodore Géricault. And he painted this amazing painting that's in the Louvre that a lot of people have seen. It's a very famous painting. But Géricault studied under Pierre Guérin, who trained quite a few of the Romantic artists, including Ari Scheffer, who was the, basically when you go to the Musée de la Ville Romantique, that was where he used to live and had his studio, which is a definite must stop for anybody. But he also, while he was there, Géricault met Delacroix, who is, of course, my favorite. He in the Louvre would go into the Louvre and copy like Rubens and Rembrandt and Titian. And so Rubens is a huge influence onto the Romantic artist, because he does have that, emotion and all the colors. Like when you see the Marie de Medici cycle in the Louvre, like that's, it's all of this. There's just so much going on. It's so beautiful. But Géricault really was like kind of obsessed with animals and horses. And so you really don't notice that if you just go and see his most famous piece. But there's a small room in the Louvre that you kind of go, and it's kind of all of these guys kind of in a row. So there's a room that's kind of Delacroix, there's a room that's Chassereau, and then there's the Géricault, and there's all these like beautiful, amazing paintings that he did of horses. And they're just, they look like they're so amazing. They look like a photograph. They're so just great.
Real. Yeah.
But what he's mostly known for is his most famous piece that he did at just 27 years old, which is the Raft of the Medusa. And that it's a pretty big painting. It's 16 by 23. He did this as he did quite a few smaller versions of it, the studies of it. One of them you could find in that room that I just mentioned in the Louvre. And I love to go find those. There's a few paintings in the Louvre that also the studies are on there. And you could go and look at that and then compare it to the final piece and see, what they changed and what is different. But when he created this painting, it's 16 by 23. It's very big. He was so devoted to making every single part of it and the bodies, because there's all these men. It was a real incident that happened in history. It was this ship, the Medusa, that basically it was this whole political thing as well. And the ship crashed, and these men just made this like makeshift raft. And they were out on the ocean. They were out there for a period of time. And at some point, like, people were dying, and they had to make decisions on who, they would eat.
Oh my goodness.
So, it's just, so here he has all this emotion. So instantly the scene has emotion, and it's an amazing, amazing painting. There's, it's kind of like two different scenes at once, because at the far end there, a gentleman is up and he sees a ship way, way out onto the horizon, and he's holding up like a white and red piece of fabric, and he's trying to signal him. But in the foreground of the painting, there's a gentleman that's like holding on to his dead son and just looks sad and, and just completely, at a loss. And other people are like dead and like falling off of it. It's this amazing, amazing painting, but he made like a full size, like model of it, like three-dimensional model. He would go to the morgue and he would bring actual body parts
Oh my God.
So he could study them and then study them as they decayed, which is gross. But
Eek.
he was like so into, everything about this and very inspired by Greek statues. So you could definitely see, when you see those statues, you can see like the muscles and everything in it, and you're just amazed by them.
Yeah.
One of the men that has his head down, and he's reaching over, and he's kind of like has his hand over one of the boards, is Delacroix. So, you see him from behind, but he did actually use his friend Delacroix as one of the models. But one of the gentlemen that I mentioned that's at the very top, and he's reaching up with the rag, trying to get the attention of the ship, which that wasn't the ship that saved them. Another ship saved them. But that is a black model, and his name, it was Joseph. And when the Orsay did this amazing exhibit a few years ago, it was all about it was called the Black Model, and they had taken all of these different black models that have been used, especially in the 18th and 19th century, and they were able to do all this research and discovered who these people were and what their names were. A lot of them we only know their first name, but this was this model Joseph, and I'll put some pictures on my website because I saw this exhibit, and they do have like where he did a study of Joseph, and like from the back, and there's another artist that painted his face, and it's just one of the most beautiful paintings. It's really, really interesting. But he was like so like attached to making sure that every detail of this and the bodies was so perfect. And so that definitely, because you look at this and it fills you with emotion. Like,
Yeah.
even not seeing it, hopefully by me just telling you about it, it makes you want to go and see it, because it's really is this really amazing piece. And it has, everything has these very fluid brush strokes and, energy and just everything about it. And a lot of it, of course, was inspired by Rubens and everything that he did. But it is, just everything about it. Then his painting inspired Delacroix. And when Delacroix said he saw this, because Delacroix was younger than him, he saw it in this atelier, and then he actually had to rent a larger atelier to hold the canvas because it was so big, and this model that he was using. And Delacroix said that after he left, he wrote in his journal that he was like running through the street, yelling and running home as fast as he could to paint, because he never had seen anything like this.
Oh my goodness, he was inspired.
Yeah, he was so inspired by it. But 5 years later, Jericho died. He was just 32 years old.
He was so young.
He was so young. So good thing he started when he was 11.
Yeah. Middle
But
age.
yeah, he, his love of horses is what kind of did him in, but it could have also been the love of the ladies, because he was thrown off of a horse and he broke his back, and it was very painful. But then also now they kind of say that it might have been one of those sexual diseases that spread like wildfire around then.
In history, they're like, he fell off a horse, but he also got syphilis.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody had syphilis then. But Ari Scheffer, who was his friend, who lived very close to him, Jericho died in where he had a studio that was on Rue des Martyrs. It was basically like 2 doors down from where Camille's studio is now.
Oh, wow.
It was very close. But Ari Scheffer was a good friend of his, and obviously the artist, and he had come over and he painted him on his deathbed, that you could also see in the Louvre, that's in that room of paintings kind of dedicated to him, which is kind of sad to see. But when you realize, like, some of these people, Van Gogh, all of these artists that are just like, when you hear how old they were when they died, it's like, but they left so much, like, they accomplished so much, or we have so much of what they did. And then you just assume that they were like, 70 or 80 years old.
Yeah. They had to work fast because
Good thing Van Gogh painted so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, of course, there's my favorite, Mr. Eugène Delacroix, born on April 26, 1798. Same birthday as mine, not the same year, but he was just 17 years old when he started studying, and he met Jericho. They'd be at the Louvre going in there to copy all of these different artists. He had said he wanted to be remembered with his name up along Charles Lebrun and Jacques Louis David, which I think he definitely accomplished. He always loved to, and it was inspired by literature, like with Greek drama and Shakespeare and Lord Byron, who was another big influence of Romanticism. And he liked to incorporate all these stories into art. So he has this whole collection that he did of Hamlet and Lord Byron plays and stories and stuff. And so that was a huge thing with him. He's mostly known, of course, because of his amazing Liberty Leading the People. But in 1832, he actually went to Morocco. At this time, Orientalism was becoming a huge thing, but most of these artists hadn't ever gone down there. They just were doing this from, reimagining things that they'd heard or seen. But Delacroix actually went to Morocco. He was one of the first artists to actually depict a scene of Northern Africa, and he was given permission to go into a harem and actually sketch the women, which was a thing that, most people were never allowed to do. He painted this painting called The Women of Algiers in 1834. And it just recently was put back on display. It had been restored in the Louvre. I saw it the morning that they put it in the day before. And I walked in and I was like, wait, that wasn't here yesterday, 2 days ago. And it is amazing. And I'll put a link on my website that you could see the Louvre. They actually had what it was before and what it was after the restoration, because a lot of the varnish that they used way back then over time has turned yellow, which is a big issue with the Mona Lisa. And so they restored it, and it's like the colors are just absolutely amazing. But that painting also inspired Picasso. He copied that many times. And so Delacroix, he was this huge period of Orientalism and also of doing the different authors' stories. But then his biggest thing was that he felt that to be remembered, you needed to do these huge pieces that were in the public spaces. So that's why we've talked before about, his paintings in Saint-Sulpice. But he had also in 1833, he did the Assemblée Nationale. He did the Bibliothèque in the Senate. He also did in 1851 the Hotel de Ville, which sadly the fire destroyed all of that, which breaks my heart. But in 1850, he did the Galerie d'Apollon, which puts his name right there with Charles Lebrun. But he did Apollo slaying the python that's in the very center of the Galerie d'Apollon. And I have a video. I did a little video in there that you could find on my Instagram, and I'll put it on my website. But he was so inspired by Rubens as well. So he wanted to be in the Louvre. And so they said, well, you can't be in the Louvre. You have to be dead for 10 years. Nobody goes into the Louvre until you're dead. And so this was his way that he got to go and see himself in the Louvre.
I love that.
I love that one. But in 1830 is when he did his most famous piece, Liberty Leading the People. And that was inspired by the actual events. And we did one of the episodes we did, I think last year, we did about that painting. So I'll put the link so you could go and listen to that again. But, he, at the time, when he died on August 13th, 1863, they said it was basically the end of the era and end of Romanticism as it was. And so with his death was the death of Romanticism. Fantin Latour, who is an amazing artist, he painted this painting called the Homage to Delacroix. And it was inspired by all these different artists and authors that were inspired by Delacroix. Most of them had never met him, including Baudelaire and Manet. And they're all in this painting. And it's Paul Signac cited that he was the inventor of color and technique, that in his book that he wrote called Delacroix and Neo-Impressionism in 1911. So, I just love anything that's devoted to Delacroix. But even Van Gogh, he copied Delacroix's Pietà, Maurice Denis and the Nabis. They did a lot that copied him as well in the Petit Palais. If you walk in there into one of the domes above that beautiful, perfect staircase is Maurice Denis did the ceiling and basically tells the story of art in French history. And then he included the Liberty leading the people.
Ah.
And another one, Theodore Chassereau, he was another one. He studied under Ingres, and he ended up like you see the room that has his paintings, and there's these two paintings he did of his sisters that is just like the most mesmerizing, beautiful painting. And then so like you see the influence of Ingres on one side, and then you see Delacroix, because then he became obsessed with Delacroix and Orientalism. And so you definitely see where he influenced both of them. He also died very young. He was just 37 years old.
Oh, no.
Yeah, all of them pass away when they're too young. But Romanticism, when you see all these paintings, hopefully now some people might be like, hey, wait, I do love that period because I love all of those artists and I love all of those paintings. So, those two rooms in the Louvre, one of them is kind of like David and his school. And then the other one is kind of the other large format French paintings, which is where you'll find Delacroix and some other ones. But, because they're so big and because they're such famous pieces, that's kind of why they're there in that area. But if you go to the Sully wing up on the second floor, that's all that whole huge square. And the whole entire back section of the Louvre is all French paintings. And it's all kind of done chronologically in time. It's pretty fantastic to walk through it that way, because then you see like this begat this, and then this begat that. And then you do see where these things, flow through history and through different artists and time.
And it is our favorite period, and we didn't even know it.
You didn't even know it, but it is called Romanticism. So it ends out our February of romantic things. And it's all about, it's not just about being in love with somebody, but it's all these other wonderful romantic pieces that you should have in your life.
And people dying on a boat.
And people dying on the boat and eating the ones that die.
That's romanticism at its core.
That is romanticism. I mean, you love them so much. They are now going to give you life and let you go on to live.
Oh my gosh, that's what true love is all about.
That is true love. But in a couple of weeks, we'll do another one talking about the authors of the period and some of the sculptors, which are probably some of your favorites as well.
And hopefully less cannibalism.
Yeah, we'll try to keep the cannibalism down to a bare minimum.
All right, guys, make sure you head over to Claudine's website to see more about all of this, ClaudineHemingway.com. Watch her live tours every Sunday for free as she gives you history, and you walk around live with her in Paris. And we hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.